What's going on, everybody? I'm Sage. Jumping into this week's beta tuning and what's going on. We were hoping for some Mythic Plus action, as well as tuning across multiple classes and so on. And Feral did get several things tuned, so we are going to discuss that in this video and kind of go over what's happened and kind of like you know where we're at. So one of the first things, if we jump into it, jumping over to Wowhead, of course. For Feral, one of the talents, the Ashman's Guidance. This was actually something in my very last video that I just put out. I put on, I talked about it being broken because it was giving you both values. They just kind of took away the or in it, which is just kind of like a visual thing. And which initially when I read this, I'm like, oh, they're just going to let that be. But no, you don't proc both of them anymore. So when you select which one you want, convoke or the incarnation, it does properly give you the second benefit. You're not just if you select convoke, you're not getting the uh, random procs of Incar anymore. So they did fix that, which is good, because then we can see the true values of that. Even though the procced Incar that we were getting didn't really feel like it was doing a massive amount, and that's just a bug fix. That's not a nerf or anything. That's really just a bug fix. So good for them to get us up and rolling the way we're supposed to. Berserk has there. You'll see a couple things on Berserk where they've changed it, and it's because of this next one. And that's our Berserk talent Frenzy, which is our Frenzy band legendary that they put in there, which is now changed to Berserk. Your combo point generating abilities bleed the target for an additional 125% instead of 150% of their damage over 8 seconds. This was obviously super strong. Um, for big AoE burst, also single target burst, because you could swipe across all targets and you could put this bleed across all targets, and swipe is a combo point generating ability. A lot of AoE damage, like burst damage. I remember back when we were doing Anduin, when all the little ads and stuff came out when you're fighting the Lich King phase of that, you would sit there and just try to spam swipe everything because it would put this frenzy band bleed across all of those targets, which is the same thing we're doing now. And since they also increased it, so Berserk gives extra combo points to swipe inside AoE, it just made it like, if you're going to have a really, really big pack and you're not going to need Berserk for like a minute and a half, minute, little over a minute and a half or so, then you could press it because then you'll get Berserk back for whatever you're going to do later on. Um, so they nerfed this. Now, a precursor to as we're talking about all the nerfs, is that Feral was very, very strong. I have videos. The last video I showed, there was a poll where I did over 200k DPS on ads, as well as doing 75 plus k on single target. So like we were very strong amongst a lot of the people that we're playing with. There are people that were doing just as much damage as us, so it was kind of one of those things where we didn't know if we were doing the appropriate amount of damage and everybody else was just doing really, really bad damage, or vice versa, if they were going to bring all the people on the top down and then bring the people that are at the bottom a little bit up. So it definitely seemed like they're going to try to bring some of the outliers in, and there's a couple people that received some buffs and stuff like that. However, we'll get through all of these. Let's go over all of this, and then we'll kind of talk about where we're sitting, really. So keep that in mind as we go over these nerfs, is that it's not like, it's not the end of the world. We needed some nerfs to get us in line with a lot of the other people, and, some things needed to change, but we did get some buffs, too, to certain things that kind of counteract some of the values. Anyway, so jumping down to the next one, we have Blood Talons. This one is actually kind of a shocker to me, because Blood Talons has been a 30% increase. So now Blood Talons, when you use 3 different combo point generating abilities within 4 seconds, the damage of your next 2 rips or ferocious bites is increased by, they reduced it from 30 to 25%. And I was shocked about this because it's been 30% for a minute now. But the bigger shocker is that since they put it on a switch talent with Lion Strength is all of your bites and all of your rips by 15%, right? And so now Blood Talons is only 10% more than all of that. Adding in a little bit more complexity to rotations, not a ton, obviously, but then also, in AoE, you're not getting the benefits of all of those bites. So now it's even less. So now it is just like, in my opinion, it's for certain you just take Lion Strength in AoE. because you're going to get a lot of procs from Apex Predator that aren't going to have Blood Talons on them. And then Blood Talons will still probably the optimal like single target one just to get that extra 10% increased damage because you won't be having Apex inside single target. So you won't have to worry about your, all of your finishers not getting the additional damage. But they nerfed it, so a lot of this seems like they're trying to push away from our single target being super strong, and then pushing more of it into our bleeds. And that's kind of the philosophy that they said that we all really kind of wanted. We wanted to go away from ferocious bite being 50-55% of our overall damage, and going into where like we have bleeds on our primal wrath, and we can AoE, and we can do some good burst AoE, and some good sustained high damage mass AoE and stuff like that. And this all of these changes ultimately, once we get down the entire tree, kind of assist in all of that. um, so then jumping down to the one right below it, Brutal Slash. Brutal Slash strikes all nearby enemies with a massive slash inflicting. They nerfed it from 109% to 98%. So you got like an 11-ish percent nerf jumping down. Uh, and obviously it awards a combo point. Now, honestly, right before all these changes came out, I was actually doing a build where you Brutal Slashed inside your AoE dungeon build, and it was actually doing very good damage. It felt a little bit awkward because you would run out of charges, right? But as long as you made sure that you were weaving your rakes around, because you had double claw rake, as long as you were weaving your rakes around, and a lot of times you'd have procs, you'd be pushing Primal Wrath, and then you'd be using your or your brutal slash to, not blood talons, but you'd be using your brutal slash to kind of AoE. So it didn't like, there wasn't a massive amount of downtime, but there were GCDs where you were using rake within your rotation, but it was doing a good chunk of damage. And it'll be interesting if that does become a thing, because this is one of those things where it's reduced by haste. So if we did end up getting into that haste, and like I said in my previous video, I talked about like us and our stats with haste. Like if we actually go that way, which I don't personally believe that we're gonna go too heavily into it, at least not beyond the first like maybe breakpoint of haste. But if we did, then brutal slash might be more of a thing because then its charges refresh faster. But they nerfed it slightly. Not a massive nerf, but it's there. This is definitely more of that single target hit. So Blood Talon, single target hit. Your Frenzy Band, more so single target hit. It was definitely very good in AoE as well. But that was a big single target burst because you're going to line up that with a Convoke if you're running a Convoke build, which gives you that much more combo point generating abilities within it. So a lot of this is big hits on single target, and then we slowly start changing it up. Now, then they go into Dreadful Bleeding, and they increase this. They buffed it from 15% to 20%. And so this is going to increase all of your rips. And this does affect, 100% confirmed, does affect all of your Primal Wrath bleeds. So all of your Primal Wrath bleeds just got a 5% increased damage, as well as your single target rip just got another 5% increased damage, which ultimately, like, this is where a lot of our damage is going to be coming from, is going to be those rips, and it already was that way. So this counteracts a lot of what they just nerfed above it, depending on, like I said, what talents you're using. If you're not using blood talents, then this is just a 5% increase of rip inside AoE, which it typically would be, right? And in AoE, the AoE main build inside a dungeon, the only hit you really took was the frenzy band up here. Oops. The frenzy band up here with the 25%, which isn't a massive amount, but every little bit helps. But if we're just talking about that dungeon build, the only real hits you got were that frenzy band one, and then you actually got the dreadful bleeding big increase one, for 5% across everything. So those two kind of counteract itself. Single target, obviously, this hurts a little bit more, and then this helps bring us back up just a tad. This one right here for Incarnation is, once again, this is just changing the effects of the Frenzy Band aspect of Berserk. That's why it's on here, because they, kicked out that piece. Infected Wounds, not really anything's changed with Infected Wounds. That's still there. I'm not actually sure why this is on there. I'm pretty sure it still was by 20% for 12 seconds, and it definitely was a 30% increase. The Omen of Clarity, they they took this right here, they changed it up by just taking it off of like the tooltip because they try to like clear up some of the tooltips. Because if you had this, it would link it up to your Omen of Clarity, like your overall. Kind of like one of my previous videos, I talked about how like as soon as you like applied all of your talents, and if any of those talents like the Carnivorous Instincts, it would show that on your Tiger's Fury talent instead of splitting the two. So that's it's just kind of a tooltip change. They didn't actually change what this ability does. Um, Same thing with the predatory swiftness. This is another one. It's like I'm not exactly sure why it's on here because it's still the same. Finishing moves have a 20% chance per combo point to make your next regrowth or entangling roots instant, free, and castable in all forms. Um, we kind of already have this. I'm kind of questioning the, castable in all forms section of that. But that's purely questioning it because, like, I'm not sure if it said, like, all forms because I didn't really ever think about if I could, like, shift out of, like, get 5 combo points, get Predatory Swifters, shift out of Feral, and then do it, because you don't need to, right? Um, but that might be the only change, if at all, that it's still going to function exactly the same way. The next one is a bigger hit. It's to the initial damage of Primal Wrath, which kind of changes. Well, it doesn't really. It reduces that initial burst damage that you're gonna, have, but not by a ton. It's less than 1% is what it's going to be doing across all of it. So you're getting less than 1% across of it reduced. So it's not. I would say it's not a massive difference, especially since they gave all of our rip damage, and the rip damage across everything is the main go-to for primal wrathing. The initial like the burst damage is kind of just what helps offset it slightly. Um, so we're still gonna same functionality, just 1% down, right? Rampant ferocity. Now this one is a little bit more uh I would say hurtful, I guess. Ferocious Bites hits all enemies affected by your rip. It was for 25% of the overall damage, but now it's 20% of the damage dealt. And this, honestly, like when I started testing it after the changes came in, this one's one of the more so noticeable ones because your Rampant Ferocity doesn't do a massive amount of damage. I think it's doing significantly less. And one of the reasons why it's doing significantly less, because we'll go into it, but they've also nerfed our base Ferocious Bite, which is one of the nerfs that are coming later on. So they nerf base Ferocious Bite, and they're nerfing the Rampant Ferocity, which takes that kind of more burst away from our AoE, our single target, everything. Obviously, Rampant Ferocity is AoE completely, but Ferocious Bite being single target, it has taken away a lot of that single target damage. Um, so we'll fill it for sure, right? Uh, Relentless Predator, energy cost of Ferocious Bite reduced by 20%. Once again, not sure why that's there because that's exactly the same. I don't know if they just like try to fix it. Honestly, I'll be 100% honest. I've not tested using this because I don't see where we would put the point in this, like where we grab a point from a vital talent point to put inside this energy one. Not completely sure, but who knows? we might end up figuring it out later on. Rip and Tear. Applying Rip to a target also applies Tear that deals 6% of the Rip's damage over 8 seconds. So they changed it from 6 seconds to 8 seconds. So they kind of just it's it's not a lot, it's 2 seconds more, but instead of it just getting all of those ticks in or doing all that damage inside that 6 second window of your initial primal wrath, it's doing it in 8 seconds, which just means like if you are kind of doing the primal wrath spam uh in AoE, then this is just going to override it even more. You do lose a little bit of damage from it if you're overriding, or if you just let it go on, then you're gaining. Or you're not gaining, but it just equals out, right? This is going to mainly be like if packs die too super fast, but when we're looking at like actual Mythic Plus, like 8 seconds is fine. It kind of just gives you a double rip across everything because yeah, your normal rip is 9 seconds, right? So like it's kind of just a double rip for as far as like durations. Um, then the next one, this one Sabretooth once again, Ferocious Bite getting hit again. So Rampant Ferocity got hit by 5%, so the AoE that Ferocious Bite does is going to be nerfed by 5%. And now Sabretooth, which Ferocious Bite's dealing 20, it was 20%, is now 15%. So now you're losing another 5% of the damage that Rampant Ferocity would have done. So Rampant Ferocity is down 10% now. Throughout both of these talents. And then actually it's even more than that because it's 25% of the overall Sabretooth damage. It's losing 5% from its base overall, and then it's losing 5% from, the main damage that Ferocious Bite does. But they did buff this one. They nerfed it and buffed it. So they nerfed the initial damage. So Ferocious Bite deals 15% increased damage and increases all damage dealt by Rip by 5% per combo point instead for 4 seconds instead of the 4%. So instead of getting 20% increased damage for 4 seconds across all of our rips on all of our targets, because the Rampant Ferocity is going to give you the Ferocious Bite AoE, which is going to increase all of your Ferocious Bites that hit all rip targets by 25% now. So you're getting a 5% increase on that, which our rip is very strong right now, right? They even just buffed it again. So our rip being strong, and now it's even stronger. So you're losing some of that burst damage, and you're gaining it throughout the bleed damage. That's really where they're trying to swap it around, is what it seems like, is that they're trying to take it from just, that big burst number to more of a to convert it to the bleed. So as long as everything is, living long enough for your bleeds to get their full duration ticks off, which is 9 seconds, then you're good to go. And once Mythic Plus comes out, I think that this is going to be perfectly fine. When we're testing it right now, as far as like testing out the builds and stuff, like even when stuff is dying, we're still doing very good damage. So, you know, let's get through the rest of this though, and we'll talk about the rest of that. All right, so moving down to the next one, Taste for Blood. This one, like the wording on it, I'm confused about how they posted this on Wowhead anyway, because it says Ferocious Bite deals 3% increased damage for each bleed on the target. I don't know if that was our conduit percentage, but it's not the talent percentage. The next two that it shows is, rank 1 is 2%, and then rank 2 is 4%. So if you have 1 point in it and you have 3 bleeds, if you have your Rake, Rip, and Thrash on the target, then you'll get the 12% if you have 2 points, or, the 6% if you just have the 1 point in it. And this is also one of those things where, like, you're having double bleeds on these targets, so you're getting even further increased value from Taste for Blood. And that really comes down to, do you want to put 2 points in it? Because the build I'm currently running, I have 1 point in it because of the next one on this list that they nerfed, which is the Tear Open Wounds, where Primal Wrath consumes up to 4 seconds of rip on targets. It hits and deals 60%. It was 75%. Now it's 60% of it instantly. So it's just absorbing a 4-second rip, which, when you look at rip, it doesn't actually have a 4-second like damage on the tooltip, but obviously you just calculate that out throughout what that would be, and it does 70 or 60, now 60% of that damage instantly. So pretty much it was just giving us a burst. As long as you had Primal Wrath rolling, you just hit it, and this was kind of like where we had that Primal Wrath in AoE. The last build I kind of went over inside the dungeons, which was you're mainly using your 5 combo points to Primal Wrath everything and get the bleeds refreshed, but it's also giving you the Tear Open Wound, as well as it's giving you the Rip and Tear effect as well. So, you know. All right. The next one, the last one that they have on the actual like feral section, is going to be Tiger's Fury. They didn't nerf Tiger's Fury at all. They actually just once again cleaned up the tooltip. I think that they didn't want all the stuff to be in one tooltip. They wanted like your talents to actually reflect like what they brought in. It's just cleaning it up. I think it just makes it simpler for like people that are looking at to see it. I didn't mind it. I thought that like if you gain the ability and then it showed all of the enhancements on it, I thought that was perfectly fine. But it seems like they want to clear it up and leave. Okay, this is exactly what that talent does. We don't want to have any of the modifiers on it because you have that selected elsewhere in the tree. And if you want to know what's going on, just look at it, right? Um, jumping past the Guardian Druid and the Resto Druid. Then we jump into General. So General, this is where I was talking about Ferocious Bite. So Ferocious Bite, finishing move that causes physical damage per combo point and consumes up to 25 additional energy to increase its damage up to 100%. That's we've been Ferocious Bite for forever. So the damage conversion that they did across here is they nerfed it from the 129%, 129.7% to 105%. So we are losing a good chunk of that initial ferocious bite damage, but then you got to think about the other things that have been nerfed. So right here, you're losing obviously a percentage of your attack power here, so it's not going to be like a direct amount of like damage, I would say. But ultimately it comes down to like what 20, 24, 23-ish uh or so percent. So if your ferocious bite per combo point is losing around 23%, our saber tooth just lost 5%, so you're looking at like a 28 percent nerf, and then rampant ferocity is also another 5% on that. So your initial damage from ferocious bite is nerfed by 28, 30-ish almost damage from ferocious bite, and then your rampant ferocity is going to be nerfed by an additional 5% from that. So you're, uh, it's going to the rampant ferocity's initial damage, which was still just 25%, is going to be nerfed by a good like 32 to 35% or so, which is what dropped it down so much. It's very noticeable how much on the damage meters that rampant ferocity dropped down, and I really don't like that because sure, our bleeds doing really good damage and stuff is great, and us having Circle on Life and Death definitely makes our bleeds feel better. But one of the big changes that they did was allow Ferocious Bite to AoE, have that functionality to AoE, and now they're just taking so much away from Ferocious Bite, which so many people wanted a bleed build, and I get it. You don't want Ferocious Bite to be like the end all be all of it. However, it allowing you to AoE that, especially in Mythic Plus or AoE scene, is definitely a very good profile to have for Mythic Plus. Um, and I don't want them to take too much away, right? I think that the kit was very good. Obviously, they're trying to tune us down, and as we get more gear and more stats, our ferocious bites will just obviously start cranking up in damage. They still hit really hard, uh, but obviously they're not going to be hitting as hard as they previously were because our crits we were getting there were times where you're getting over 100k ferocious bite crits, and on top of getting a whole bunch of free ones through Apex Predator, it was just like you're getting a lot of damage very, very quickly. And some of that's a little bit RNG, but it is it is what it is. Ultimately, like I don't think that we're doing too horrible. Now let's go over some more baseline things that they changed. Mark of the Wild, same as this was already inputted. They changed it from giving us crit and magic damage taken to versatility for by 3%. This is I've talked about this before. If they gave us Leader of the Pack back, it would give Feral some kind of like unique utility to be brought over like Boomy, or something like that. Because currently, there's no reason to bring a feral over a different type of druid inside a raid. So, there's that. Um, and then jumping down, shred. This is purely single target nerf, right? So shred the target, causing instead of 60% of your attack power, it's 54%. So you're getting about a 6% nerf there. Purely single target, they're attacking that single target aspect of us very hard. Ferocious Bite's going down hard. Uh, as far as like its total overall damage, it's going down by that it was like 28% or so, and now we're losing another 6% from shred, which is all of that's purely single target, and then you're losing a little bit in AoE, but not nearly as much as you are in single target. And then thrash, thrash strikes all nearby enemies, dealing like it was 8%, now it's 9%. They went up 1% in damage, and then additional 31.2% of attack power instead of 27.7. Ultimately, it's like a wet noodle. I mean, you can see it by the amount of percentage of attack power it's doing. Thrash is just not a very strong hitting ability. It is a it's still a modifier bleed. So this does increase once again our AoE though a little bit, uh, very small amount, but still a little bit, right? Um, and we'll take any kind of increases they give us to offset it. But this is definitely a tune to they're reducing our single target by a very good chunk, but our AoE is not suffering as much from all of this. It is suffering some though, right? We are losing some damage. Rampant Ferocity wasn't a ton of our damage. Um, However, it's, you know, not exactly cut in half. They took about a third of it away with all the nerfs that they have that they that they brought in. But most of your damage is coming from that Rip and that Primal Wrath. Primal Wrath did get nerfed, but Rip in total got buffed. So as far as like the AOE scene, it's not hurting us as much. And this is all coming back to we were really strong, right? Like we were pumping um, inside dungeons. So yes, some of the nerfs always feel bad when you get them, but at the same time, we were strong. So it really comes down to once again, and I've said this previously, if they bring us down and then decide to bring everybody else up, then that's a bad spot to be in, right? However, if they bring us down a little bit like they have, and then they bring everybody up a little bit, and we're still, you know, at the upper majority of damage dealers, then we win, right? As long as we're in that upper half of them, especially with the damage profile that seems very good in Mythic Plus, you know, I'm really hoping that things stay the way that they stay in the functionality that they are anyway. Um, so after Thrash, we scroll down here again, and we do get a little bit of more changes. You know, there's quite a bit. They've done a lot to Feral, and they've adjusted it, the tuning noms, slightly here and there, which is fine. That's what we want, right? We just want little changes, not drastic changes. I think the Ferocious Bite was probably the biggest change out of everything. But then we jump down here and we have Rake. So you rake the target. It was 24% of damage. Now it's 27. So they gave us a 3% buff on that. And then that's the initial damage. And then additional, they buffed up the rake from 102.7 to 115.55 of the attack power bleed over 15 seconds. Now this is huge, right? So if this continues this way, then double clawed rake in AOE might become more of a thing to kind of counteract some of the damage that we've been missing out. But this double clawed rake is still in that spot where it's between double clawed rake and getting more energy through like tireless energy that we have because there are times where we feel very starved depending on procs and so on and tireless energy just really like even just 1 point in tireless energy makes it feel a lot better, significantly better, and you get that point from um, your double clawed rake. So if it does come down to it, it's going to be like, okay, where's the energy going to come from, where how much of this is going to be needed type deal. And that will come out. Well, we'll test that and see how it's coming a little bit further along. And then we jump down to the next ability, which is Rip again. So this is our single target Rip this time, which is the ultimate damage dealer for everything that we do. Finishing move causes bleed damage over time, lasts longer per combo point. And it went from 36.96 to 36.6. So in down 0.3 pretty much damage, which is not a lot. That's a very small amount, and it's kind of odd that they would reduce this by zero point 0.3, but then give us a 5% buff through dreadful bleeding. A little weird that they did that. So like, it's not, I don't know, it's kind of a weird change, and I don't know if they're trying to do this because Rip is accessible to all specs, right? So I don't know if they're trying to prevent, like, I don't know, a resto cat weaving with Rip, but I don't know why that's a very small tuning number to change, right? Like that's super small. And who knows? That could just be like, okay, this is just an overall hit for that ability, but then Feral Druids are just going to have that increased bleed through the Dreadful Bleeding. So between Dreadful Bleeding and Lion Strength, you're getting you know, now you're getting 35% increase over um, your rip instead of just the initial 15 that it was. And then if you go, you know, obviously if you go into the Dreadful Bleeding and into uh, Blood Talons, then you're getting 45% increase to your rips. Um, so yeah, that is the ultimate nerfs that we got. Slight changes. I think they just try to shift it a little bit away from as much burst, and shift it a little bit more into from ferocious bite damage and rampant ferocity damage into the other damages. And when I tested this out and looked at like the damage numbers that we have, Rip is doing a massive amount of damage in dungeons now, and then your Tear, which is your Rip and Tear talent, is doing is pumped up too. Like that's got an increased value, as well as Tear Open Wounds has gotten a little bit more increased value, but not a lot, but it's there. But you definitely notice it with Tear jumping up several spots on your DPS chart. But then you notice Rampant Ferocity went down a ton of spots. Um, and I'm going to test this out more, you know, and keep trying out different things, different builds, and see how the point breakdown is going to really come out. I still hope that they look into some of like our point acquisition, because like I said, I'd like to be able to put 2 points in Carnivorous Instincts and have Ashmane's Guidance. That would be really cool. But if it comes out to, you know, they're releasing the point acquisition that we have right now inside the talent tree, you know, that's fine. I hope that they don't tune us anymore until other classes get tuned. I think that's kind of my main worry, is that I don't want them to hit us too hard over several different iterations before they start tuning other classes. Because there are several other classes that when you look through the tuning from from the patch notes that didn't get tuned. Like the other day before this came out, I was fighting for #1 DPS spot with a protection paladin. Like their their stuff needs to get changed. Like they're doing some obscene amount of damage, over 100k DPS on some pulls, which is just, you know, it's not a damage dealer, so that needs to get changed. And it's two abilities that are doing it, so it definitely seems like something that's just a tuning knob that needs to be changed on those. Um, you know, and I hope that they look into more of the other specs and judge it from there. The other thing is that like this is all happening in heroic dungeons and the very limited raid testing that they have, uh, and I hope that they wait until to do too much more with all the specs until Mythic Plus actually comes out and gets tested, and we start actually seeing where numbers lie, where you do more Mythic testing. I think there's a Mythic boss testing coming out on Friday or something like that. Um, you know, because currently with everything just dying super fast, that's we benefit. Feral Druids benefit from things like dying periodically, right? Obviously, our bleeds, we want things to live for our bleeds to do their damage, but the energy that we're getting from Predator resets and stuff like that, like, is huge for us to keep pumping out damage. So I really hope that they don't just take the flat value, right? And it's Blizzard tuning. We'll see how it goes. Um, but yeah, let me know what you think about the tuning. Overall, I don't think that the entirety of what we've gotten hit with is horrible. We needed to get nerfed a little bit because it definitely looks like, you know, there's a couple of us damage dealers that were doing above par from what other people are doing, and they're just trying to tick us down a little bit. And the changes that they did not only kind of change our damage profile slightly more into bleeds, away from ferocious bite a little bit, at least in AoE. But it kind of brings us down in line with others a little bit more. Single target is harder to really see how things are going to go, right? There is raid testing. I haven't done any of the actual raid testing, boss testing, and stuff like that yet. I just play on the single target dummy, and I'll have to do a lot more of that now with the build that we have, because they've altered Ferocious Bite significantly. So we'll have to see how much that is. And ultimately, with Ferocious Bite, the hit on it in single target, there's not really much of a way around it, right? Like you can't like, oh, I'm not gonna buff up Ferocious Bite because it's still one of your main sources of single target damage. Um, So with what they've changed, like our AOE inside dungeons is still very strong, but our single target like profile definitely got hammered in, and I don't know if they're trying to switch us because Farrell's been very good at single target for a very long time, and not so much AOE, and it definitely seems like we're reversing roles quite a bit, especially with the changes they just did. I haven't, like I said, I haven't done very much raid testing. However, they're hitting our single target significantly. So I don't know if there was some ray testing that showed that those values are just going off the charts. Um, but in my opinion, from what I've tested anyway, like we're really good on AOE, and they hit that significantly less than they hit our single target. And single target boss damage is very noticeable comparative because we were doing, like I said, we could burst up to 75k, and it's a heroic boss, so they're going to die very fast. So that burst kind of kept with it for a good while, especially like RNG procs and stuff that played into it. Um, so we were bursting very high, and then it would kind of trickle down. Now you notice the difference between a single target boss encounter and your AOE damage, or single target boss encounter versus previous one, right? Like that's the biggest noticeable difference in our damage. The other thing is we got these nerfs, and this is kind of like we got our tier sets, right? So a couple things we got to figure out. In my previous video, I talked about like one of the big things would be like if that crit, because you get 5% crit, you get 1% crit for every combo point you spend. So every 5 combo point finisher you use, you get 5% crit. It lasts for 5 seconds, and if that stacks, then it would be super, super not super. It would be strong, right? It would be very strong, but it doesn't. So it doesn't matter how many finishers you use. It's just a 5% crit for 5 seconds, and it keeps you refresh the duration every time you bite or uh, rip or primal wrath, so on and so forth. So it's not as strong as it could have been. Obviously, like that could have been broken though, definitely, especially with how quickly we can burst out some of those finishers. So you know that's information we have. But the 5%, you also have to remember we have 5% to ferocious bite and 5% to rip with our foreset, which counteracts a good chunk of kind of these nerfs. Um, not all of it, but a good chunk of it. So we're gaining. They're giving us 5% baseline increase to rip, and then they're giving us another 5% with our um, tier set. So like Rip is doing some pretty chunky damage right now, and Rip has a lot of things that modify it. Obviously, Rip and Tear is the biggest one, and then your Tear Open Wounds one is getting modified by that as well. So we're getting some pretty decent damage into those bleeds, especially in AOE environment. Single target, I'm not sure how that's going to play out as much, like how much of a nerf all those ferocious bites getting deducted. I don't know how much that's going to counteract with our rip getting buffed. Um, because that was ferocious bite. The ability ferocious bite is definitely the biggest hit. But I wanted to throw in that we got our tier set, so that kind of offsets some of this a little bit, which would be why sometimes you'll see that the overall damage numbers and stuff like that kind of seem the same inside a dungeon anyway. Um, like one of the most recent dungeons I did, which I'll make sure I have inside this video, I did 76k, almost 77 overall damage, while the tank was the next, and then we had a couple other issues. There are bugs inside it too. There's bugs that came with this build. A lot of classes, abilities seem to be got like code seem to be reverted back, like stuff that they fixed up over the week, and then they sent out this beta build, and then they changed stuff, and when they changed it, some of the fixes that they did obviously got broken, like the warlock that was in the group that I said I did 76.9k overall in. He was saying like half of his abilities just weren't working at all, and you could tell because he couldn't do any damage because everything, he just wasn't able to press any buttons. um, Also, like one of the biggest meme things that if you've been paying attention to beta, or most people that were streaming today hoping that Mythic Plus would come out, is Invoker's PvP talent was building up walls that were supposed to last for 8 seconds that did not, and people were playing Fortnite and building up these huge landscapes because they could build these permanent walls across each other and stack them up, which was hilarious. It's hilarious that stuff like that happens, but it is beta, so that's when that stuff happens. And very quickly, I would say within like an hour or two or something, when I got on anyway, it was quickly fixed. So you know, they're working on it. The bug for feral, the main bug for feral that I've noticed is the animations for our abilities over our base kit. So that would be when you proc Apex Predator's Carving, for Ferocious Bite, the glow over the Ferocious Bite that lets you like signifies, hey, press this, you know, not working again. It didn't work previously, and my weak aura for it is not functioning either. I'm trying to get that to work because honestly, part of rampant ferocity, reduced damage inside of some of the dungeons I've been testing right now, could definitely be to me not realizing that I have that buff when I have it, because the only thing I'm going off of is that across the screen it'll say Apex Predator on it, in like gold lettering, and that's I'm like, okay, I have it. And when I don't have that, I'm like, okay, I should have gotten a proc by now. I look up and I already have a proc. I just missed the wording. So you know, Apex, the rampant ferocity definitely going to probably be a little bit more than some of my testing, and I'll try to fix that throughout this week. But same thing happened with your predatory swiftness. So you like your heal, like it's not procking and showing those procs the way it kind of used to. So keep that, keep that in mind. I think as well as like the omen procs, like the omen would proc and shine around all of your abilities. And some of that, sometimes it seems to be working, but a lot of times it doesn't seem to be working, or it seems to be offset. Or for the ferocious bite one, like the glow sometimes is there and then just lasts there permanently. Like it doesn't go away, or it's always on. So there's some bugs and stuff visually that need to be fixed, and I haven't really recognized anything like internal yet that's bug wise. So they fixed the us getting that free in-car proc every once in a while. They fixed that, and then our animation things got broke, which they were broke previously too, and then they fixed it. So it shouldn't be too hard for them to fix that again. Um, but yeah, I mean, tis the nature of the beast, right? In beta, and we still got, even a lot of people are worried because they're like, oh, 3 weeks and we're getting pre-patch. It's like, well, pre-patch is still a month long. They still have that month to correct things, and they're already jumping in and tuning and fixing things. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. Our single target, I hope, gets some love, or they stay away from it at least, because we are that's where we're hurting out of the two, AoE and single target. We're hurting more in single target than we are in AoE now, but that still requires a lot more testing, especially on my part, because I haven't been able to apply that single target build inside a raid environment or anything yet, because a lot of times during raid testing I am doing other stuff, during the day. Most of my video recording happens at really, really late at night or early, early morning. So um, and that's pretty much all I got. So if you guys have any comments or concerns about the nerfs that we got, anything that I missed, any synergies that I missed, just let me know in the comments below. And past that, I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, thanks. Bye bye.